Mom, Michael owes nearly $400,000. I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave the house. They want to sell it, and you might have to move into a nursing home. Those words didn't just hit me, they threatened to tear apart everything I'd fought for in 38 years of motherhood. My daughter stood before me, exhausted and broken, delivering the crushing news that could shatter our family forever. If you want to hear how one mother's firm refusal became the shield that protected her family, stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal the true power of strength and love. Now, let's begin. A fragile stillness filled the old house, the kind that feels almost sacred, as if time itself had paused to catch its breath. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast a pale gold glow through the sheer curtains, slipping in to settle softly on the polished wood floor. The air held the subtle scent of fallen leaves and damp earth, mingling with the faint trace of lavender from a dried bouquet resting on the mantel. Beyond the window, a gentle wind coaxed the brittle amber leaves to spiral down, twirling slowly in a melancholic dance, their descent marking the slow fading of another season, and perhaps, the fading of something far more precious. In the living room, Helen sat quietly, the lines on her face telling stories that no photograph could capture, stories of love and loss, resilience and quiet surrender. Her hands, worn but steady, rested on the arms of a faded velvet chair, a chair that had witnessed countless sunrises and sunsets, countless whispered prayers in the dark. On her lap lay an old book, not opened, not needed right now. Her eyes, a deep well of strength, were fixed on the world outside, watching the leaves fall as though each one carried a memory she was trying to hold on to. Helen was a mother who had carried the weight of her family's burdens for nearly 4 decades, often alone, often unheard. Her strength was a silent sentinel, guarding a home built on sweat, tears, and sacrifice. This house wasn't just her sanctuary, it was a repository of every laugh, every tear, every whispered bedtime story, every scraped knee she had ever healed. To lose it would be to lose the very fabric of her identity, and yet, today, that loss hovered dangerously close. The front door opened with a soft creak, but the air shifted instantly. Rachel entered, her figure a stark contrast to the composed stillness in the room. She moved with the hurried, unsteady steps of a woman who had run through storms, a woman whose spirit was stretched thin by months of worry and sleepless nights. Her eyes, rimmed red and heavy with fatigue, flickered nervously as she clutched a crumpled folder, the weight of its contents mirrored in her tense shoulders. "Mom," Rachel's voice was fragile, cracking under the strain of the news she carried. "It's worse than we thought." Helen's gaze remained fixed beyond the glass, tracing the descent of a solitary leaf as it drifted downward, surrendering to gravity. Inside, the years of watchful waiting and silent endurance pooled like a storm beneath her calm exterior. She felt the tide of emotions rise, fear, sorrow, frustration, but she held it at bay, like a seasoned captain steering through treacherous waters. This was a moment she had anticipated, even dreaded, but she was not unprepared. Rachel stepped closer, desperation threading her words. "The debts, they're crushing us. The lenders have set a deadline, half the money by tomorrow morning. If we fail," her voice faltered, and her eyes darted away, unwilling to utter the inevitable. "They want to sell the house, Mom. And they're saying, they want you to move into a nursing home." Helen's heart clenched at the words, yet her expression remained unbroken. She lowered her eyes slowly, finally meeting her daughter's gaze, the raw edge of panic there a mirror of her own buried fears. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened the folder, revealing photographs that gnawed at her soul, Mason and Lily, their young faces caught unaware in the cold watch of strangers. The lenders weren't just after money, they were holding her grandchildren hostage in a game she refused to lose. The room grew thick with unspoken dread, a suffocating silence punctuated only by Rachel's ragged breaths. Helen's lips pressed into a thin line, a silent vow forming behind her steady eyes. This was not the moment for tears. This was the moment for iron resolve. For 38 years, Helen had been the silent fortress for her family, absorbing blows and shielding wounds unseen. Now, as the shadows lengthened in the fading light, she understood that the fight ahead would demand more than quiet endurance, it would require the fiercest battle she had ever faced. Rachel's shoulders sagged, the weight of hopelessness threatening to consume her. I don't know what to do, Mom. I'm scared, for the kids, for us. They're watching us like vultures. Helen reached out, her weathered hand covering Rachel's trembling one. We will face this, together, she said, voice calm but resolute. But first, we must stand steady. Storms come and go, but roots run deep. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, scattering the last of the golden leaves. Inside, Helen sat back in her chair, a quiet sentinel braced against the coming tempest. The fragile quiet from the afternoon shattered like glass. Rachel's hands balled into fists at her sides, her breath ragged as a storm of anguish and fury erupted from her lips, sharp words, raw and laced with desperation. Her voice cracked the calm like thunder, sharp invectives spilling out, each syllable a release of years of fear, frustration, and betrayal. You just don't get it, do you? She spat, her gaze burning into Helen's unyielding calm. How can you sit there so coldly? Like it's nothing? You're going to sell the only home this family has left, shove me and the kids out, and you're just, okay with that? Then, as if the words alone could not contain the tempest inside her, Rachel's fury took physical form. Her hands, trembling yet fierce, snatched up an ancient porcelain vase perched delicately on the sideboard. It was a cherished heirloom, a fragile relic from generations past, and with a scream that tore from the depths of her despair, she hurled it across the room. The vase shattered upon the hardwood floor with a violent crack, porcelain shards scattering like the broken threads of their family ties. Silence fell immediately afterward, the kind of silence that demands to be heard. Helen rose slowly, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She approached the fractured remains, kneeling down with hands aged by years of toil and sacrifice. Her fingers, though trembling slightly, were steady as she began to gather the scattered pieces. Each shard she lifted was a testament, a symbol of endurance, of strength born from pain. In that moment, Helen was not merely collecting broken pottery, she was reclaiming control, stitching together the fragments of a life threatened by chaos and betrayal. The room hung heavy with unspoken words as Rachel collapsed onto the worn rug, tears mingling with breathless sobs. Helen, sitting beside her, did not rush to comfort, for she knew some wounds required time and truth rather than soft words. What don't you understand? Rachel's voice cracked again, raw and pleading. This isn't just about money. It's about the kids' safety, their future. How can you be so heartless? Selling everything just to feed that monster's addiction? Helen's gaze hardened, not with anger, but with iron resolve. Rachel, I'm not heartless. I'm tired. Tired of watching you throw good money after bad, trying to save someone who won't save himself. Rachel flinched, the truth slicing sharper than any rebuke. You don't know what it's like, she whispered. To love someone broken. To want to fix what's shattered but only end up bleeding. Helen reached out, brushing a stray tear from her daughter's cheek. I know more than you think. More than you want me to. Her voice softened, yet remained firm. Your husband's debts aren't just numbers on a page. They are shackles that threaten to drag us all under. And every time we pay, every time we bail him out, we strengthen those chains. We're not protecting him, we're feeding the cycle. Rachel's eyes brimmed with conflicting emotions, love, resentment, guilt. She struggled between the instinct to protect her family and the unbearable weight of betrayal that tightened like a noose around her heart. Helen stood and paced slowly, tracing invisible lines in the air as if outlining the harsh realities that had brought them here. Michael's promises to stop, how many have there been? How many times did you believe in a future that never came? At some point, love without boundaries is not love. It's surrender. The words hung between them like a verdict. Rachel lifted her head, searching her mother's eyes for any hint of compromise, of a softer path. But Helen's gaze held only clarity, a boundary drawn in the dust, unmovable and absolute. In this fracturing moment, their roles reversed, Rachel, the daughter desperate to hold her family together despite the crumbling foundation, Helen, the mother hardened by experience, willing to be the unyielding wall even if it meant breaking hearts. The vase's shattered remnants lay between them, a stark reminder of the fragility of what once was, and the painful necessity of facing what must be if any part of the family was to survive. The weight of shattered porcelain still lingered in the air, its jagged edges echoing the fractures that ran deeper than the family home's walls. Helen's eyes softened, and she settled herself back into the worn armchair, the quiet gravity of her next words drawing Rachel's attention with a subtle but compelling pull. "There's something you need to understand," Helen began, her voice low but steady, carrying the weight of memories best left untouched. "I didn't always carry this battle alone. This isn't the first time addiction has haunted our bloodline." Rachel's breath caught, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. Helen's gaze drifted to the window again, as if the past were a distant landscape visible beyond the glass. "My father," Helen continued, "he was a gambler. Not a man who chose the darkness, but one who was swallowed by it." She paused, summoning the images from decades ago, images she'd buried beneath years of silence. "I was just a child when I watched my mother suffer in silence. She cooked our meager meals in a kitchen heavy with fear, eggs fried in barely a drop of oil, the scent of hunger sharper than any reprimand." Rachel leaned forward, eyes wide, the room shrinking around the weight of Helen's confession. The neighbors whispered, their eyes sharp with judgment. They saw a family unraveling and a mother losing herself in the wreckage. "I remember the laughter from the boys at school, the teachers who looked away, but none of that hurt as much as watching my mother's quiet love for a man who was breaking her heart, day after day." Helen's fingers tightened around the armrest, knuckles whitening. She never left him. Not because she had no choice, but because she believed in a man who kept promising change he never delivered. Rachel swallowed hard, the lines between past and present blurring. The echoes of her mother's childhood pain mirrored her own fears, her own desperate hopes. "But Mom," Rachel's voice cracked, filled with a fragile defiance, "Michael, he's not like your father. He's different." Helen's eyes met her daughter's, calm but unwavering. "I want to believe that too, Rachel. I want to believe that every broken promise this time could be the last." Her voice was gentle but carried a gravity that filled the room. "But I have seen this before. I have walked this path once, and it leads only to more broken things, broken trust, broken homes, broken hearts." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken truth. Rachel's chest heaved, torn between the love she clung to and the betrayal that chipped away at it. "You love him," Helen said softly, "and that's why it hurts so much. Love can blind us to the dangers right at our doorstep." Rachel nodded, tears slipping free. The fight between hope and reality, between loyalty and survival, played across her features in an agonizing dance. Helen reached out, placing a hand gently on Rachel's. "You're not alone in this. But love, true love, sometimes means recognizing when to let go, when to protect yourself and those you cherish most, even if it means breaking your own heart." For a moment, mother and daughter sat side by side, connected by pain, history, and the fragile thread of hope that they might rewrite a legacy marred by addiction and silence. The air between Helen and Rachel had thickened, no longer the fragile, tentative connection of shared pain, but something heavier, carved from hard truths and unyielding resolve. Helen rose from her chair, her posture straight and commanding despite the weariness in her bones. The house seemed to hold its breath as she reached for a weathered wooden box tucked beneath the side table, a box sealed with memories and the weight of decisions long delayed. From within, she withdrew a stack of carefully organized papers, legal documents, financial statements, and agreements drafted and redrafted over sleepless nights. She laid them on the table with deliberate care, the crisp rustle of paper punctuating the silence like a solemn drumbeat. "Rachel," Helen began, her voice steady, "if we are to move forward, to rebuild, there must be rules. Conditions. This cannot continue as it has." She paused, letting the gravity of her words settle. "Michael must enter a full inpatient treatment program, no half measures, no outpatient visits. 3 months minimum. This is not a request, it's a necessity." Rachel's face fell, the weight of those words striking her like a cold wave. The husband she loved, flawed and broken, now had to surrender to confinement, away from home, away from them. The pain was sharp and immediate, a mother's instinct to protect battling the bitter medicine of reality. Helen continued, unwavering. Until then, the family will come live here. This house, the home I've guarded for decades, will be your refuge. We will share its walls again, and its burdens. Your house will be rented out. The income will be used to provide stability for you and the children. No more debts to chase with empty pockets. Rachel's throat tightened, caught between the sting of shame and the fragile bloom of hope. The security Helen offered came with strings, and yet, it was the only lifeline left. And the money, Helen said, sliding another document across the table, will be under my control. Every penny, every bill, every transaction. I will manage the finances. No exceptions. This is not about power, it's about protection. Rachel's fingers trembled as she reached out to touch the paper, her mind a tumult of pride and humiliation. To relinquish control, to admit that she could no longer guard her family alone, was a wound deeper than any addiction. Helen's eyes softened as she added the final clause. You and Michael will sign a complete separation of assets agreement. If he relapses or leaves, custody and assets will remain with you. You and the children must be safeguarded, no division, no bargaining. The room grew still once more, the finality of Helen's conditions weighing heavily in the space between them. Rachel's lips parted, but no words came. Her heart throbbed with a cocktail of emotions, grief for the marriage that was unraveling, fear of the unknown future, and a flicker of hope for a chance to reclaim peace. Inside, she wrestled with the duality of love, the instinct to protect a husband she wanted to save, and the fierce, primal urge to shield her children from harm. The lines blurred and shifted, each choice carving deeper wounds yet promising survival. Helen watched her daughter carefully, the years of wisdom reflected in the calm strength of her gaze. She was a sentinel, a woman who had fought for decades not only with others but with herself. The cost of this love was high, but it was the price of true protection. Rachel finally exhaled, a tremulous breath that carried both surrender and resolve. The path ahead would be hard, filled with sacrifices and shattered illusions. But beneath the weight of shame, there was a seed of hope, a promise that this time, boundaries might build a foundation rather than walls of isolation. Their eyes met, a silent accord passing between them, a pact forged not from idealism, but from necessity. To save the family, they must first save themselves. The room was cold, sterile, and unforgiving, a far cry from the warm sanctuary Helen had fought so hard to protect. As she stepped inside the glass-walled conference room, her heart steadied against the cold steel tension that gripped the air. Around the long, polished table sat three men, sharp-suited, expressionless, their eyes glinting with a calculated cruelty that had been honed by years preying on desperation. Michael's debts were not just numbers, they were chains forged in shadows. These were men who thrived in the gray spaces where legality blurred, where threats were whispered rather than shouted, where fear was currency. Helen's gaze swept the room once, measuring each man, the tallest, with a gaze like cold iron, the second, thinner and sharper, his smile a slash of menace, and the third, an impeccably dressed figure who spoke only when it served his advantage. Mrs. Donovan, the thin man began, his voice oily with false courtesy. We are here because your son-in-law has a significant obligation to us. We understand your intention to settle, but terms must be clear, binding. Our patience is limited. Helen nodded, her face composed but her mind razor-sharp. She produced the agreed sum, nearly $400,000, carefully counted and neatly bundled in a briefcase she had brought from the bank. The weight of it in her hands was less than the weight of what was at stake. I am prepared to pay in full, Helen stated, voice unwavering. But this transaction must be legal, transparent. We require full documentation, receipts, contracts, and a clause ensuring no further claims once the debt is cleared. A murmur rippled through the men. The tallest exchanged a glance with the man beside him, but Helen's steady stare held them firm. The second man leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the table with thin patience. The principal is $200,000, he said. Annual interest at 100%. 3 months accrued interest brings the total to about $250,000. Additional fees and penalties have brought it higher. Helen tilted her head slightly, the faintest trace of challenge in her eyes. Fees not specified in any agreement are unacceptable. We will not be extorted with hidden charges. The tension thickened, the atmosphere almost suffocating. The security guards standing at the door seemed more than sentinels, they were enforcers of silent threats. Helen clasped her hands calmly on the table. Touch my family, and you will regret the day you did. This is my final offer, legal, complete, and non-negotiable. A long silence stretched, eternity held in a breath. Then, with a reluctant nod, the men signaled agreement. Papers were exchanged, signatures pressed, and the money transferred with meticulous care. As the last note was counted, the room's cold veneer returned. The second man's smile returned, but it did not reach his eyes. This door closes forever, he said quietly. Any future contact from Mr. Donovan will be met with zero tolerance. Helen gathered her belongings and rose, the weight of victory tempered by the knowledge of battles yet to come. The family was safe, for now. But Helen knew the true fight was only beginning. In the car, as they left the sterile halls behind, Helen's mind raced. She was not merely a woman who paid debts, she was a shield forged from preparation and knowledge, a mother who dared to face darkness head-on to protect the light of her family. Her warning was clear: cross this family, and they would find no weakness. For Helen, fear had been conquered by resolve, and love had become a fortress. The sterile hum of the treatment center was a stark contrast to the chaos Helen had battled outside its walls. Michael's arrival was subdued, a man stripped of bravado, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion and the weight of accountability he could no longer deny. For the first time, he was not the one running from his demons, but confronted by them in a clinical room, surrounded by strangers who demanded honesty and discipline. Back home, Rachel embraced the hard truth of independence. Freed from the suffocating uncertainty, she began to reclaim pieces of herself, late-night study sessions, small moments of laughter with her children, and the steady rhythm of daily routines rebuilt on cautious hope. The house Helen had guarded became a refuge again, not just a building, but a symbol of survival. Days blurred into weeks, and slowly, Michael's voice returned, in letters written with trembling hands, in phone calls tethered by supervision, in brief visits where the shadows of his past were tempered by present efforts. Each communication was a delicate thread woven into a fragile tapestry of tentative trust. Yet, within the fragile hope lay the twin shadows of doubt. Rachel's heart oscillated between belief and suspicion, her mind guarding fiercely against the temptation to forgive too quickly. Every promise Michael made was weighed against a ledger of past disappointments. Each step forward was cautious, each smile guarded. Meanwhile, the grandchildren thrived, their laughter echoing through the house like a healing balm. Mason took to soccer with a fierce determination, chasing dreams with the lightness of childhood. Lily's fascination with the stars brought quiet evenings of wonder, her small hands tracing constellations on dark canvases. Helen observed all of it with a steady gaze, aware that healing was neither linear nor perfect. It was a messy, painful process filled with setbacks and breakthroughs. She understood that the cracks in their family might never fully vanish, but that was no longer a measure of failure. It was a testament to survival. The transformation unfolding was fragile but real, a slow reweaving of trust where it had been torn, a cautious reopening of hearts once barricaded by pain. Helen's strength softened into guidance, her vigilance a shield without smothering, allowing her family to learn to walk again on their own. This was not a story of instant redemption, but of gritty perseverance, the messy, beautiful unraveling and rebuilding of a family choosing to believe in the possibility of better days. Years had passed, yet the echoes of that turbulent chapter still hummed softly in the corners of Helen's mind. She sat by the window in the quiet dawn, the pale light spilling gently across her hands folded in her lap. Outside, the world awoke anew, but inside, a profound peace settled like a warm cloak around her heart. Her grandchildren, once fragile threads in the fabric of their fractured family, had grown into bright, resilient souls. Mason's confident strides across soccer fields and Lily's eyes wide with wonder at the cosmos were living testaments to a future forged through strength and boundaries. Rachel, once burdened by despair and uncertainty, now stood tall, courageously rebuilding her life with fierce determination and grace. Between them lay a legacy etched not in wealth or possessions, but in the pages of a worn leather-bound journal, Helen's memoir to those she loved most. It was a silent manifesto of resilience, a guide passed from mother to daughter and beyond. Within its pages were truths that could not be spoken aloud in times of crisis: the necessity of saying no, the courage to erect walls when love demanded protection, the strength found not in yielding but in steadfastness. Rachel had learned that love was not always soft and forgiving. Sometimes, it was a fortress. Sometimes, it was a firm hand closing a door to save what remained inside. That understanding had forged a new kind of bond between mother and daughter, one built on mutual respect, shared scars, and unwavering commitment. Their family was far from perfect. Cracks remained, stories left untold, wounds slow to heal. Yet beneath the imperfection lay a foundation stronger than any they had known before, a foundation of truth, courage, and a love that dared to set limits. The moment of public recognition came quietly but powerfully. At a community award ceremony, Rachel stepped onto the stage, her voice steady as she shared her journey, the falls, the losses, and the fierce love that saved her. She spoke of her mother's unwavering strength, the woman who had not wrapped her in endless comfort but had saved her with hard truths and firm boundaries. Helen watched from the audience, tears glistening as she held her granddaughter's hand. Applause rose, warm and heartfelt, yet the true victory was in the silent glance exchanged, a conversation beyond words. Later, beneath the soft glow of evening, mother and daughter sat together in the familiar quiet of the home they had fought to protect. Their conversation wandered gently, reflections on pain, hope, and the unspoken power of refusal. Sometimes, Helen said softly, the greatest act of love is knowing when to say no. Not to break a heart, but to save one. Rachel nodded, eyes shining. You taught me that. And because of you, I'm strong enough to protect my own family. Outside, the morning sun rose higher, flooding the garden with golden light. Helen sat peacefully by the window, the world turning gently around her. Her heart was full, not because the past was forgotten, but because it had been honored, understood, and transformed. This was her legacy, a story of a woman who dared to be the unyielding wall, who chose to say enough, and in doing so, saved her family, and herself. If this story inspired you, please consider subscribing to hear more stories of courage, resilience, and the fierce love that changes lives.